Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L coming in to talk about My Hero Academia chapter 342. Let me tell you guys, I'm pretty happy about the chapter. I got a lot of things to say about the chapter. Also got like one interesting note. It's what I kind of referenced in the video title. We'll have to talk about it just because it's kind of weird between like the fan translations and the proper translations. I just thought it would be a nice little title for the video. But lots of thoughts. Oh, let me move my monitor here a bit more. Okay, yeah, lots of thoughts. I gotta say, I'm ultimately very happy with something that happened here. You know, we are in the calm before the storm, or as Viz likes to call it, the extreme quiet before the storm. I don't know why we can't just go with the cliched one, but okay, Viz, it's cool. Anyway, the calm before the storm, and in this chapter, we get a little bit of the Ochako Izuku talk. I was very excited about that because you guys, if you've been following the videos, you know I've been talking about like the author was not letting them talk until the last possible moment or the more dramatic moment. I believe ever since we saw Ochako sleeping when Izuku was returned, I was saying like, yeah, he did that because he doesn't want these two to talk until the best moment. And I do believe as we went through the weeks, I mentioned that they probably would end up talking like maybe during a very dramatic moment, or the calm before the final fight, the calm before the storm, or the night before the final fight. So overall, I was very happy that that was the correct read, and that is what the author ultimately did here. Now, one of the cool things in the chapter is the chapter is actually pretty vapid in a few places, or you know, it's some of the conversations are, there's pretty much nothing in them, and that in and of itself points to, it actually tells us a lot about what the author is thinking. And there are a few spots here where you can see his thought process, which, yeah, it depends. Like, you could say that's unfortunate, you could say that's fortunate. It depends on your particular opinion on whether or not it's good to see the author's hand at any given point. But with this chapter, he has given us a little bit of a blueprint. And with this chapter, he also does some interesting things with All for One, which will be hilarious to talk about, because in this chapter, he actually makes All for One look very stupid. But the thing is, like, he does this a lot. He's very happy letting All for One look stupid. It's just kind of, All for One is almost verging on being a comical villain, but I'm just not sure, because like, there's those moments where he just doesn't treat him with that much respect, and then there's moments where it's like, okay, All for One still seems to be credible to some degree here, but like, All for One himself is just a giant joke at this point. And this chapter in and of itself makes him a giant joke, which is hilarious in the meta sense. I do wonder if, like, in the back of his head, he's always writing these villains, always thinking like, yeah, you know, these guys are pretty silly. And you just very quickly talk about that. There's some villains who are treated with a good chunk of respect, and one of them is Toga. Toga is treated with so much respect compared to everyone else, that Dobby, like Spinner, and All for One, they wish they got the treatment that Toga did. Similarly, Shigaraki is also treated with quite a lot of respect. You don't see Shigaraki having goofy moments, or you don't see Shigaraki being made to look a fool unless it's specifically because he's being victimized by All for One. So it's interesting. It's definitely a little interesting thing that he does here. But with all that said and done, let's just get into the video proper. I got limited time here, so I gotta go through this quickly. So we begin with the first page, which is honestly quite ridiculous. Seeing UA go out of their way to make these people think like the world outside is not a war zone is ridiculous. Like, holy crap, just let Nezu take control of the entire world at this point. If the man's able to have a functioning society and everyone gets to have robot helpers, like, what the heck is going on here? Why aren't we a utopia? Just let Nezu take over. Oh my, this was actually interesting, and it's just, this makes the civilians feel very entitled. This makes them feel like they get a lot of nice stuff for who they ultimately are. Like, these people are not making the world better. Like, holy crap, man. I mean, good on Nezu to have the resources to be able to do this. But at the same time, it's just a little bit jarring to see the heroes are trying so hard to keep these guys and their sense of normalcy in place. It's just so ridiculous. But that's what happens when you have money, I guess. So props to Nezu. At this point, he should just be the leader of the free world, because if he's able to do this during an apocalypse, just give him all the funds and he'll be able to do it. Anyway, this page starts us off with the idea that we have more of the traders. So this is a really good thing because back when we had Aoyama's parents coming in, my big question was like, are they receiving stuff through text messages or are they receiving things through actual communications with people? Because then that means there's more traders in UA. And as we see, there are more traders within UA. These are all people that work with All For One. And mind you, like in the chapter, you can kind of see they are all afraid of All For One. This isn't, they are not doing it because they want to. They're in a bad situation. Now, page 2 is the page where this just makes All For One look stupid. In All For One's credit, what's likely happening is that Nezu countered him. Nezu just pulled on the counter. But the thing here is, you have this page of All For One looking so menacing, so intimidating. It's like you're inflating that balloon. That balloon's going to suffocate you. And then, like a few pages later, someone goes and pops the balloon. It no longer is going to suffocate you. It's no longer going to take up space in the room, right? That's what this setup with All For One smile really looks like. It's you're blowing up the balloon and then Nezu comes in and just bites it. And like at this point you also have to be wondering like, what is All For One really trying to do? He just wants Izuku out of UA again. So to do what? Just to have him run around for a couple of days, have a few villains come after him that can't do anything? Like, what is All For One's game plan here? Regardless, there were some critical lines in this one. Ultimately, All For One just wanted people to be against Izuku, so he leaves or whatever. And the other critical thing here is UA was keeping the danger from the common people. He thought that this was going to, he thought this was the case, but as we saw later, UA countered it. So we'll talk more about this later and why exactly it is that All For One got deflated here. Page 3 is the return of the kids. So the critical thing here is that we did not get to see any of the kids working together in the area. I know there were people that wanted to see that, like Kayla. But the thing here is, this was to be expected because the author doesn't actually really care about this kind of stuff anymore. He's just trying to move to the end. Seeing team fight tactics would have extended the manga way too much, and all that it would have done would have been to show off the characters doing cool stuff, making little gains. But no, we couldn't get that. We couldn't get some characterization. We couldn't get character interactions. Nope. We gotta keep on moving, using characters that at this point don't really have much else to say. So yeah, this is one of those unfortunate spots. You kind of have to hope that we get this expanded in expanded materials. But at this point, yeah, we're just going straight to the fight. There's already been enough setup. There's no point actually doing small fry investigations. There's no point of further fleshing out the world. This is endgame. We got to finish up the manga. Now, in terms of what the author is saying here, you have to also see that he says temporary break from the search effort. So if this is a temporary break, this suggests that the search effort for them is going to continue into the next day once they're at their new place. I'm not too sure about that because we have the operation there. So I think temporary break honestly might be a little bit misleading depending on what we see in the next 5 chapters. So not the wording here might be a little bit screwy because by definition this can't be temporary if this is the last time they're actually doing search efforts before the operation. We move on to page 4 where we have just a bunch of little character interactions, which appreciated. Now the critical thing about page 4 is specifically what the author did in the final third, where he has Izuku saying that, yeah, there's barely any time to talk and I haven't been able to thank her properly. Those lines are very important because they say what the author is concerned about. When he goes in and he has to explain why a character acted a particular way, it's because he thinks that explanation is really important. So this is him being super aware. And the other thing that he has to do here is because really these characters could have talked before. There's 24 hours in a day, 12 of those hours you're spending them in close proximity with these people. Izuku had time to go fool around with Mei. He 100% had time to have a 5-minute conversation with Ochako, right? He 100% did. But what the author has to do here is establish, oh, no. There really wasn't any time. I haven't been able to thank her properly, right? And then you have the other things like Ochako going to sleep on the first night. Izuku's had opportunities to talk to other people. It hasn't been all quiet. He could have talked to her during a quick 5-minute break while they're all training. There were many options here. But this is ultimately just the author saying this is how it kind of has to go. And, just on paper, just fill in the blanks. He really didn't have any time. And that is totally okay. That's just him covering his bases. But I do appreciate this. And it does show that what you have to appreciate here is that he understood that he had to have Izuku explain that there was actually no time to talk, because logistics wise there's 100% time to talk. So props to the author on that one. One last mention here is that we have Mineta making a comment about dirty stories. It's nice that Mineta gets something to do in the chapter, because Kirishima didn't really get anything, even though he's somewhere in the chapter as well. We go into page 5, and page 5 I find a little bit odd. So we have All Might coming in, and this is pretty much the setup for, hey, we're going to explain to you guys what's going on. There's a funny little detail where you can see Kaminari got like just shot forward, probably because he got startled. That was pretty cool. Now, the weird part for me is that you have Momo asking, does this concern the situation with Aoyama? And then you have Sukati putting up his finger. I don't fully understand what that interaction was. I don't understand the significance of putting up one finger and not like a thumbs up or something like that. Like when I see that, that makes me think like, is he telling her to shut up or be quiet about something? Like I'm not too sure what that signal means. Maybe we're gonna talk about Plan A. Maybe. Like I really don't know, so I would love to know what you guys are thinking about that particular situation. But anyway, we get the setup. We're going to talk about the final plans for the pivotal second war, and the author doesn't tell us anything. We only have the expressions to really go off of here. So in the montage, we see that Ragdoll and Hawks are conveying information to Endeavor. This is likely the first time that they are passing on this level of the plan. Endeavor looks sad. I'm thinking that Endeavor looks sad because this is where Shoto's going to be in danger, or like Shoto's going to have to do something difficult, or like the plan that they're going in is going to be like a relatively tricky one. Page 7 also has interesting little details of Kurogiri. We see Aoyama behind bars. I personally don't really care that Aoyama's behind bars. I mean, at the end of the day, he tried to attack Izuku. He fired a laser at Izuku. Sorry. And danger sense went off. Sorry. Aoyama, like, legitimately, I could not care less. Best to keep him in there, because you don't really know if he's going to get desperate and fire a laser at someone else again. Props to White Despair, because he's the one that pointed this out to me during the live streams. But next to Aizawa, that looks like Monama's haircut. And honestly, I am thinking that's probably Monoma. Monama's probably going to copy Kurogiri. Kurogiri is probably going to be important. I do think Kurogiri is going to get one last hurrah. I think he's going to be critical. I think Shirakumo is not done here. So that'll be pretty cool to see. Interesting choice having Aizawa's eyeless socket being the one to be in the frame. I would have liked to see Aizawa's actual eye looking at Kurogiri. It would have told us more about Aizawa's expression, so maybe that's why the author hides it. Anyway, since the way the author framed this, what it really tells you is that Kurogiri and potentially Monoma, and maybe these other two characters that are there, they're going to be critical for the plans, which really shouldn't be that much of a surprise. Anyway, we're back at UA, and we have shots of Bakugo and Shoto and Izuku. So that's just the author reminding us that, hey, yeah, you know, the ones that really matter in all this, Bakugo, Shoto, Izuku. No Uraraka, no Ira, no Kirishima, no Momo. Those are the three that matter the most. It's just like one of those little biases. Now, really of the two, Shoto has something going in there. Bakugo has something, Izuku has something going in there. Bakugo doesn't really have a personal enemy other than making All For One his personal enemy just because he hates him or something like that, right? So interesting picks to put in there. But it just kind of shows you where the bias is for the guy. But we all know that it's Shoto, Bakugo, Izuku. Those are the top three of the manga. And then you have like Ochako and Ida. And then after them you have Momo and Kirishima. Okay, so page 8. We go into where All For One starts to be made to look a fool. And again, this is most likely because Nezu is countering them. At the end of the day, Nezu did know that there were traitors in his midst when he caught the parents, and the parents probably told him how this went down. I do wonder if the other traitors in this crowd know that Aoyama's been captured, but it's hard to tell when they're not really talking about it. And it's such a big area that they might be telling themselves, oh yeah, we don't see them because it's a big area or something like that. Anyway, let's assume that they know that Aoyama's parents have been caught. So the first thing we get on page 8 is that the population has been told that Shigaraki is going to be a big issue in 4 days. So that's important because it takes away a lot of the leverage that All For One had. They could have fanned the flames and put things against Yue, because they could have made it so that the civilians were mad that Yue was keeping things from them, right? But Nezu gets in front of that by just letting them know what's happening, and he also gets in front of it by having Izuku leave. Now Nezu probably knows that Aoyama, his job was to get Izuku to leave, so he's doing it. He's probably playing into it. Ideally, we get Nezu actually giving us a quick talk or a quick rundown of what he did here and why, because we really need to maintain Nezu's intelligence here. So hopefully that's something that's coming to us in the future. Regardless, this guy is feeling great because he doesn't have to do anything. They have pretty much played into his hands from his opinion. He probably doesn't know that this is all going according to Nezu's plan or All Might's plan, whatever you want to call it. Ultimately, when you have this guy calling them fools, it's him who's being made the fool, and by extension, All For One. All For One's getting all kind of maniacal, trying to be sneaky, and it's like, oh, they just did my job for me. Okay, I guess. Anyway, for the Izuku leaving page on page 9, there's other little details, like Izuku makes a comment about you giving me more than enough time to clean up myself. That's a reference to like the earlier parts where Ochako was saying just let him clean off the mud and all that kind of stuff. You have Snipe pointing out that, hey, if things go down, we just need you guys to be ready to get out of here. So they're being very open and honest about that. Very good stuff. In terms of the bye-bye page or the bye-bye panel, you have Izuku and Ida bowing towards them. So that's really nice. Really nice touch on those two there. Now we go into page 10, and page 10 is another really critical page. So first, with the traders, they said their future is guaranteed. So that's just telling you, like, okay, they were actually afraid of dying here. They were afraid that All For One was going to kill them. And now with the panels of everyone hugging, like, this is very much, this is it. Like, the next stuff that we're going to get, we're not going to get 5 chapters of downtime ever again. This is it. We are going into the final stretch here. We might have a battle that has many stages to it, and with maybe 1 or 2 little break chapters in between the stages, but this is it. One thing that you can see here that really indicates the finality, if you look at the parents, we are pretty much seeing all the parents that have been given speaking lines in the manga, not counting Aoyama's parents. Jiro's parents are there, Ochako's parents are there, Bakugo's parents are there, Shoto's parents are there, Inko is there. Yeah, no, these are all the relevant parents. There's I think only Koda's mom is the one that we've gotten a design for that we don't see here, but Koda's not important. So when you have the author doing this, there is that sense of finality. He pretty much brought up all the designs that he had available to him for the main characters. And this also just reminds you that these characters are not well fleshed out. Like, the Class 1A does not have symmetry applied to them. They are not a very nice classroom. Jiro's parents being there, honestly, is the big thing. Because Jiro's not one of the main characters. So when she shows up, it's more jarring because it reminds you, oh yeah, like, Jiro's like the only secondary Class 1A character that has her parents like really actually revealed and you know their character. So this is definitely, this panel indicates the finality of things, and it also indicates just the weakness of Hero Academia, that being that characters aren't treated fairly, which ultimately leads to these really incomplete scenes. Now there are a few extra little scenes here. Kayla pointed out that Shoto doesn't hug his family. To be fair, not a lot of other people are hugging either, so I don't think that's a big issue. They probably hugged afterward. We see a panel of the nurse. She looks really withered. She might have been kissing people all night just to like help them heal up. Her lips might be puckered out. We have Eri and Kota having a quick talk with Izuku, which is really nice. We have Izuku's #1 fan and Death Arms. It's unfortunate to see Death Arms looking so sad here, but we have Death Arms and we have the guy that was talking to Ochako during her big speech. So that was a nice little moment. Now the other critical thing we have here is Shoji handshaking with the discrimination victim. This is by far the most aggressive indication of the Shoji storyline. And of course, the author is having him have a moment of understanding with the girl who has been recently victimized because of the way she looks. This is so on the nose that it's ridiculous. Like, this is so weird. If you don't know that Shoji's getting a storyline, This is the weirdest thing here, because when you look at these panels, yo, where's Kirishima? Where's Mina? Where's Momo? No, it's Shoji. This guy barely talks. So it's funny. It's funny because this is one of those moments where the author is just showing his hand, because it's so odd. The guy doesn't treat his minor characters from Class 1A with this level of attention normally. So when Shoji pops up there, it's super jarring. Now, mind you, he's doing this because he's gotta like put down the foundations. At the end of the day, you are seeing a very simple thought process here, being that Shoji's probably going to have something to say about the whole thing about mutant discrimination, given that he hides his face because he doesn't want to scare people, given that he's also pretty monstrous. He's probably, yeah, he's going to have something to say. Like, him talking to that girl probably means that he and that girl had a moment of understanding, that they talked about how much this sucks to be the way they look because people think that they're villains or whatever. This is going to be a particularly valuable thing later on, specifically if Shoji references her experiences. So when we get to that point in the manga, you're going to be able to like, oh yeah, go back to 342 and like, yeah, that moment when they were talking or they were shaking hands, it was because they had this moment where they kind of understood each other. To speak on this to a critical level, what's going on here, and like this is being the most like pretentious reviewer type, this is like the most pretentious reviewer type comment that I'm about to give kind of thing, right? So if you're enjoying the manga, like don't take it serious, but it's tricky. The problem with this particular panel is that it's jarring because the author doesn't do a good job with characters at the same rank as Shoji. That's the only thing that makes this critically not that great. But when you look at it in the context of the future, it is pretty great because it's indicating that the author was smart enough to foreshadow the stuff that he wants to do in the future. But mind you, the author also puts himself in a pretty bad position because he's told us repeatedly for a very long time that Shoji has a storyline. And he keeps telling us like, hey, no, Shoji's going to keep doing his best. I don't see him doing his best. I don't even know what that means. So that's the issue here with the Shoji stuff on the most critical level. It's obvious why the author is doing what he's doing. But for that future moment, this is really important for the payoff. Ultimately, with this Shoji stuff, this is likely going to be one of the most interesting things to talk about at the end of the manga. Just because you can really paint an interesting narrative about how this storyline shaped out and how it was tied together with the spinner stuff, because that's likely where we're going. I can't wait to, when we get to the end of the manga, to really look back at this and see what exactly was going down with the Shoji storyline and see how everything built into the final moment for this particular character. Anyway, at the bottom of page 10, we find out 30 kilometers from UA. So, personally, I really hate distances. I work with distances a lot for my stories as well. And whenever I'm trying to figure out, like, what's a reasonable distance, I walk a lot. So, I know a lot of things based on walking. So, that's how that's how I map out my environments. So 30 kilometers from UA, actually, you can walk 5 kilometers per hour, right? So 30 kilometers from UA is actually a 6-hour walk. That's a lot. That's pretty far away. Now, mind you, in a car, you can go 80 kilometers an hour. You're going to get there within the hour. So that tells you quite a bit about where they are. It's interesting that just 30 kilometers away you have just 6 hours of a walk away from UA, you have so much destruction. It's always interesting to see how some places are destroyed and some places aren't in Hero Academia. But yeah, 6 hours. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. I mean, again, like in a car, you're going to be able to close that without problem, but 30 kilometers is a pretty good distance. Now, is the 30 kilometers going to come up? Probably. The thing is at the end of the day, if they have to rush back to UA, it's not going to take that long. It'll take less than an hour. If Izuku's moving at 100% speed as well, yeah, like Izuku and Bakugo would probably get back to UA in half the time. So that's 3 hours. If they're in a vehicle, they're going to be back at UA within an hour. That might be why you have to keep track of the 30 kilometers. We go on and we have Makeshift Fortress Troy. So first off, when this came up on the spoilers, I had to ask the live stream because I wasn't too sure about the story of Troy. I've looked it up before doing this chapter, and pretty much Troy was a city that was under siege for 10 years. So this is one of those spots where it's like, what exactly was the naming sense in universe, and what exactly was the naming sense out of universe? This page is really interesting though, because this is where Sero says something in the fan translations, and we'll bring that back to Troy here. Sero says, maybe the last place we'll ever lay our heads, let's hope not. In the fan translations, he had said something along the lines of, will this place be our grave? Let's hope not. And I'm not sure if you can tell, but there's a fundamental difference between those two translations. The Viz translation makes it so that the whole situation is a lot more open. The fan translation makes it sound as if those kids are expecting to be fighting within this area. And now we go back to Troy. Troy was a city that was under siege. If we look at the naming sense of Troy, it seems like they're expecting to be under siege. And when you have Sero's fan translation comment, it turns into a situation of, oh, one of the plans is to draw the people toward this fortress and then have the kids defend the fortress. Like, pretty much make them sitting ducks because they know, like, All for One's going after them. Now, mind you, that's probably some degree of the plan. To some degree, they expect to have to defend this place. You wouldn't call it Troy otherwise, because, like, let's face it, Troy's a city that ultimately went down. It's very, very, very on the nose to name your fortification after a city that went down after 10 years. So keep all that in mind. Right now, if I had to make a bet, I'd say, like, yeah, no, probably a significant portion of the strategy is to actually just defend this fortress, or just fight from within this fortress. And again, a fortress. To let you know, like, I think it was pretty much Sun Tzu that said it in The Art of War, but to take down a fortress, you need 3 times the battle power. Essentially, it's 3 times the men to take down a fortress. But you just make the adaptation. Regardless, interesting stuff. We find out they're going to be living there. We find out it has like a similar layout to Heights Alliance, so not a big deal. Snipe says to get in gear, but I don't think these kids are actually doing much. They might be getting ready to like go out for another search, but it's so hard to tell with how little the author is actually telling us. Anyway, after that, we go into pages 12 and 13, where we go finally into the Izuku Ochako talk. Now, the only thing that would have made this more perfect was if they were talking at night, but they weren't, so that's okay. Izuku and Ochako are talking, and now the thing here with these conversations is what the author doesn't say. There's really not a lot of stuff going on here. So let's break it down. Like in page 13, you have the very simple interaction of Izuku explaining why he couldn't say thank you earlier, and now he's thanking her. Also gotta say, like, the author like made them look very cute. The art's really on point here. And I do like that they seem like teenagers at this moment. They seem like awkward teenagers. I think the effect is 100% great. I'm not really upset that he didn't have more things to say. Because, like, honestly, you have to pick one heavy topic and just keep it. You can't really stay too long on conversations on a shonen like this. We have Ochako leading us into that she's kind of weird, and Izuku being like, nah, you're not weird. You're pretty much the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. But anyway, Ochako snaps us out of that, and she says that the big thing that she's really concerned about is Toga. And one of the things she ends off with is the idea that she doesn't know the first thing about Toga, and that ultimately really bothers her. And for that reason, she's weird. Now, we had a conversation about this on the live stream, but very quickly, just to go through this, you know, I do find it weird that they think it's weird to think about the person behind the evil. And the reason that this is weird in general from like my perspective is because in Western media, like especially if you watch a lot of crime procedurals or dramas, the idea of a villain having personality underneath them is not all that strange. Like the big trope would be like, yeah, the villain loves his mom too, right? It's not strange for villains to have connections. It's not strange for villains to love their moms. It's not like that humanizing aspect to villains. That's pretty common in today's popular culture. Heck, the humanizing aspect of villains is why a lot of people end up liking villains. So the weird thing here is that, if this was our society, it wouldn't be strange to think about the person underneath it. Mind you, like, kids might not be able to do it, but like, especially if you read a lot of books or if you watch a lot of media, you'd probably be thinking like, yeah, there's usually a cause and effect relationship to a lot of people here. So that's the odd thing for me. Now, mind you, in the context of the Hero Academia Society, Hero Academia Society is so much more polarized and limited that Ochako not having this thought makes sense in the context of the society, and also makes sense in the context of a child. Ochako is a child. This has been one of the most consistent things about her. She is developing at actually a pretty normal rate compared to the absolute monster that is Izuku here. So ultimately what you have here is a sense of weirdness that makes sense given the polarization of Hero Academia Society and the general shallowness of Hero Academia Society, where they are willing to just call people villains and just slap that label on them. Now, I do like what the author did here, because, Ochako's talking about, yeah, I'm feeling a little bit bad about Toga because I don't understand her, but at the same time, like, look at all the people that she's pretty much killed, and like, one of the quick things you can say here is like, yeah, Toga looks sad, but imagine how sad the old lady that she sucked the blood out of to transform into her. Imagine how sad she was. She might have died from a heart attack for all we know. So that was actually really good nuance, and I like that Ochako points out that we can't just forgive this, and they ultimately did take down a lot of people. I'm just sad that I don't know the first thing about Toga. Good stuff. Now one thing that we see here is that she's keeping weird, silly thoughts out of her head. This is not good for the character. This is like the worst kind of rhetoric that she has. It is consistent with her, because this is the kind of person Ochako is. She tries to shove things out of her head. So consistent on the character. Good job, author. Now here, what she really needs to be doing, like, and this is probably going to be like her final place as a character, is being able to have those thoughts and also still being able to function. Like, there's nothing wrong with acknowledging that she doesn't know anything about Toga. So hopefully we see some clear progression towards that, of being able to balance, I have to stop you, but I also want to understand you. And on that note, I think the author had a little bit of a missed opportunity here, but I think he couldn't get it in there because he was rushing. When Ochako's talking about this, Izuku mentions that he saw a little boy inside Shigaraki and that there's no way to avoid a battle, but I can't ignore what I saw deep down inside. Honestly, Izuku would have been the best person to talk to her, because Izuku has these same opinions as she does, and she acknowledges it when she says that both of them are kind of weird. But if Izuku went in there and said, like, yeah, there's people like Shigaraki and Toga, but then there's people like Muscular, because that's actually extremely critical. Izuku's Dark Izuku journey began with him wanting to understand what was going on with his villains, pretty much. And Muscular, there is no understanding that guy. Like, actually. And this would have been one of the great points here for Ochako, just for her to be ready for the possibility. There's some people that you just can't reason with. That would have been a nice little bit of nuance, because it tells Ochako, like, yeah, some villains actually, there's not really much to them. But for some others, it might be worth actually thinking about how we can help them out. So this is an unfortunate spot. I really kind of wish that the author could have cut out some other things to put in. Just acknowledge the fact that the Muscular fight happened, because that was so important for Izuku, instead of just going straight to Shigaraki. And I think it would have been good for Ochako to hear that even though Izuku had a conversation with Muscular, he still put him away. That would have been absolutely critical, and that would have made this already relatively mature conversation a little bit more mature. And had she known that Izuku had done that, I think that could have helped a little bit with the weirdness, just knowing, like, yeah, no, it's actually possible to try to understand your villains and still put them away. Now, mind you, like, honestly, this shouldn't be the job of a law enforcement officer to, like, get in the mind of every single person you put away. That should be the job of the therapist. But Hero Academia Society doesn't seem to have therapists, so unfortunately, heroes have to do all things. And then we have a pretty lackluster page with page 16 of Shoto, Kirishima, Bakugo, and Ida. And pretty much what they're just saying is like, hey, I have an older brother too, like, I understand. And Shoto's like, I don't even know this guy. And it's like, I'm going to make him eat food with me. That was a really vapid conversation. It's just like, there's not really all that much going into it. other than giving you an idea of what Shoto wants to do. Like, he doesn't want Toya to die. He wants to save Toya. He wants to talk to Toya. So that's good, but it ultimately tells you that the author just doesn't have a lot to say with these characters anymore. Kirishima not getting anything in this segment too just kind of reinforces that. And then page 17, we end off with the day of the operation. Like, it's going down. So whether or not 4 days passed or it's just 1 day, hard to say. Given the temporary stuff, maybe it's... Well, we'll know next chapter, but maybe we should assume that 4 days passed. I guess. I don't know, man. It's hard to tell, especially with All for One. Now, speaking of the things that the author didn't say, Ochako's character is all about her feelings. And in this one, Ochako didn't talk about her feelings to Izuku. That pretty much guarantees that Ochako is going to have a moment where she's going to say, oh yeah, after this is all over, I'm going to tell Izuku how I feel. And you better believe that when Toga shows up, 100% they're talking about their feelings. Because Ochako's character is dead in the water. Okay, not really, but I want to say dead in the water. I want to say it all week. She's not dead in the water, but the author has severely limited her. And giving her Toga as the person to be her final villain is worse, because Toga doesn't really have much else. Well, she might have more now, but she doesn't have that much else. Toga's probably going to be de-escalated by Ochako, in all honesty. And they're probably going to talk about their feelings, because that's how the author likes to do this. So we'll have to see what happens there, but like, yeah, at this point, guarantee it. Ochako's going to say something about telling Izuku how she feels at the end of all this, because it's impossible that's not going to happen, because this girl has been about bottling up her feelings. She bottled them up so hardcore that she even told Toga she did it. So Ochako's a joke in that regard. Her conversation is going to come down to her feelings about a boy. I'm being also really aggressive, but that's just because this is just kind of fun. Other things with Shoto not really having much to say here. That's just, I think the author wants to be very careful giving away what's going to go down with the Dobby situation. So that's why that ends up being a relatively empty conversation. And then in terms of other things, just for the future, like when I'm looking at this chapter, we are missing so many characters having their final lines in the sand. Ochako and Izuku aren't really getting any more after this. But the fan translations kept the editor comment that said that the preparations for the final fight are underway. So that makes it sound like we're not starting the action next week. We're still in the prep phase for the fights. So I would say that we would probably get the missing characters getting lines next week. So I'm thinking like Momo, Kirishima, Mina, Kaminari, Jiro. Those are the characters that I would think need to get their lines, and Tsuyu's going to be shoved in there too because it's Tsuyu. So let's hope that those characters get to put some lines in the sand, or final lines, before going into this giant fight. In terms of other predictions, I did this on the live stream, but just very quickly to get them out of the way. I do think that, you know, we still have so many little things that we need to get covered. We still need to see the flashback of how the second user got his scar. We need to see Yoichi die. We need to see how exactly that went down. I'm pretty sure Yoichi died protecting second user, and some of his blood fell into second user's mouth. That's my going theory here. All for One's probably going to take over Shigaraki. There's probably going to be 2 phases of a fight. Now, I'm wondering if the All Might death is still valid. If we're getting an All Might death, what's probably going to happen is that All Might's going to die at the midpoint climax, and then Izuku's going to he's going to go unconscious for a while, and then after that, you know, Izuku comes back for a heroic second win and beats up All for One in the Vestige World or something like that. Any other things to note? Izuku's not wearing a hero costume. He's likely going to get his hero costume for the final battle. He's not going... Well, actually, if the author makes Izuku go in there with the UA gym uniform, holy crap, props, but I don't think it's happening. Overall, though, I think this was a really interesting chapter. I personally really enjoyed it. I can't wait to look into the future and see, you know, all the little things that were pointing towards things coming. Yeah, overall, it's a fun chapter. I really enjoyed it. Gave us a lot to talk about, and let me know what you thought down below. So, at that point, we got 40 minutes. I'm going to call it a day. Guys, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, I hope you have an absolutely great day.